On today's episode, it's part 2 of my Chicago Blackhawks Summer 2025 top prospects list, where I'll break down which prospects I have ranked between numbers 11 and 15 in the organization.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Jack Bushman. Go and give me a follow on X at JackBushman2, but make sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey, so that way you don't miss out on any of the latest Blackhawks news and updates. All right, Blackhawks fans, opening things up on the show here today, carrying over from yesterday. It's part 2 of my Chicago Blackhawks Summer 2025 top prospects list. Make sure to go and check out part 1 if you haven't done so already. Only makes sense to really go about these things in chronological order. Yesterday, I broke down some of the honorable mentions and numbers 16 through 20 in my current rankings. I also mentioned how there's not going to be Connor Bedard, Frank Nazar, or Wyatt Kaiser on this list, so don't be expecting to see them, and don't be super pissed off when you see they're omitted from this list. It's not because they're not part of the top 20, it's because I now have them outside the prospect stage at this point of their respected careers. But super excited to get into part 2 here today. Before I do, though, just a quick recap of where I left off, and a reminder, go check out yesterday's episode to hear my full breakdown on each one of their prospects, as well as my thought process in terms of how I have each of them ranked. Some of the honorable mentions that I mentioned yesterday: Landon Slaggert, Martin Misiak, Samuel Savoie, Adam Guyan, and Nathan Bem. Guys who just didn't quite crack into that top 20, but I do still think are worthwhile to keep an eye on in the prospect pool these next couple of years. Then starting things off at number 20, I had big left-handed defenseman Nolan Allan. At number 19, 2024 third-round selection, AJ Spellacy. Then at number 18, Aidan Thompson, a 2022 third-round selection for the Blackhawks. Another 2024 third-round pick came in at number 17 in John Mustard, who just wrapped up his freshman season with Providence in college hockey. And then last was number 16, where I had Colton Dach, man who's fully expected to be battling for one of those final forward spots on the Blackhawks opening night roster. So picking up where I left off from yesterday, that takes me into number 15, where quite honestly, I really believe it starts to get tough to dictate who's going to go next in these prospect rankings. And I think this is where things can really start to vary based on just who you're asking and how highly you rate some of these prospects compared to one another. But I think this is where we really get to start seeing just the sheer depth that the Blackhawks have now in their prospect pool, because kicking things off here today at number 15, I have left-handed defenseman Ethan Del Mastro, a prospect that I've been super high on these last couple of years. I'm still super high on heading into this season. I've mentioned a couple of times in recent weeks during my defensive pairing projections episode, and just a couple of other times throughout the course of the summer, I really do believe Ethan Del Mastro is the most likely of the contenders between Kevin Korchinski and Nolan Allan to earn that final left-handed defenseman spot in the opening night lineup. And I think that's just because Del Mastro has the size to be ready for a full NHL campaign. And compared to Nolan Allan, I think he's got the better puck skills of the two and is just more physically mature and more physically imposing than someone like Kevin Korchinski, who is still a young 21-year-old who can continue to add some size to his frame and will still benefit from more time down with the Rockford IceHogs. But I really love Ethan Del Mastro. He's a prospect I've been super excited about for a handful of years, someone who's regularly been inside my top 10, inside my top 8. But now I just have him down at number 15, not because he's like fallen out of favor on the Blackhawks blue line or anything, or because I'm thinking about him differently now. It's just, again, because of the sheer depth of this prospect pool and the amount of prospects that I think have higher ceilings than Nolan Allan, but maybe not as high of a floor as he does. And Del Mastro, of course, was a fourth-round selection for the Blackhawks back in 2021, selected 105th overall. He's now listed at 6'4", right around 210 pounds. That's that big frame I was referencing just a moment ago. And he's set to turn 23 years old this winter in January. And this past season, when he was up in the NHL with the Blackhawks, tallied 6 points, 2 goals, and 4 assists in 24 games worth of action. Also had 9 points, all assists in 47 contests with the Rockford Ice Hogs down in the AHL, which was a little bit disappointing considering the production we got from Del Mastro with Rockford during his first full professional season, where he had 37 points, 7 goals, and 30 assists in 69 AHL games, was an AHL All-Star for the Ice Hogs as well. But altogether, I do think he made the most of his opportunity up in the NHL with the Blackhawks this past season. And for a player of his size, what really stands out to me about Del Mastro, he's always going to be known as a defense-first type of defenseman, but I really do think what stood out to me whenever I've watched him is he's not a elite skater by any means or anything, but he moves well for a player of his size, and I do think he doesn't panic under duress, right? He eludes pressure really well and just makes the simple plays that are out there in front of him. And again, as I mentioned, compared to a defenseman like Nolan Allan, when they're both kind of at similar points in their careers right now, I definitely think Del Mastro is the one with the better puck skills. So that's why I have him here at number 15 ahead of Nolan Allan in my prospect rankings. I really feel like he's kind of in a similar mold to Colton Dach, but I do think he has the higher probably upside of the two in terms of what I believe their value will be for the Blackhawks down the road, but in a very similar vein to that on the defensive side of things. So that's why I have him here at number 15, just ahead of Colton Dach. Up next at number 14, another prospect I've been super excited about for these last couple of years and is just a little bit further down in these rankings than I've had him in my last couple of ones. Again, for the same reason as Ethan Del Mastro, it's Ryan Green, who was the 57th overall pick in 2022, second round selection for the Blackhawks, 6'2", 192-pound center who's set to turn 22 in the fall in October. And he had 38 points, 13 goals, 25 assists in 40 games as the co-captain of Boston University during his junior season, back-to-back 36-plus point campaigns for the Terriers to close out his college career, not the way that he wanted it to end, as lost in the Frozen Four the year prior and then lost in the championship game this past season, which I know had to sting for a kid who passed up signing his ELC with the Blackhawks last summer in order to return to BU for his junior season. But we also, of course, got to see Ryan Green in a couple of NHL games, made his NHL debut, and then played in one more game for the Blackhawks at the end of last season. And like Colton Dach, I think he's going to be one of those guys battling it out for those final roster spots during Blackhawks training camp. He's a player with good size, 6'2", and a two-way player for sure. Took on some defensive responsibilities with Boston University. I think all in all just has a very well-rounded makeup, plays with decent pace as well, and again, is a player with some plus size. I don't think he has the skill or the speed necessarily to be a top 6 forward piece for the Blackhawks down the road, but I do think he has the capability to be a third line or fourth line center of the future for the Hawks. And I'm really interested to see if they're going to be using him mostly at center or on the wing these next couple of years. But I do think altogether he's more well-rounded than someone like Colton Dach. He's got the better pace. I think he has the better well-rounded skill set. So that's why I had Ryan Green coming in ahead of someone like Colton Dach. And I do think between he and Ethan Del Mastro, he is the one with a little bit of a higher ceiling. So that's why I had Green coming in here at number 14 and Ethan Del Mastro at number 15. Two guys who I think could be very solid depth pieces for the Blackhawks down the road. Ethan Del Mastro likely, number 4, number 5, number 6 defenseman of the future for Chicago. Ryan Green, if he winds up being a puzzle piece here, it's likely going to be somewhere in that bottom 6. Both players, I really do believe, could play very good roles for the Blackhawks, though, down the road. But those are numbers 15 and 14 on my updated Blackhawks prospects list. Coming up in just a moment here, I'll dive into numbers 11 through 13. But first, I got to talk to you all real quick about Monarch Money. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can, because whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you complete visibility and full control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center so that you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And what I personally love about Monarch is that instead of juggling multiple financial apps at the same point in time, which can definitely be complicated, you could just use Monarch to track your spending, plan your long-term goals, and to check your finances. So go and take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money by using our promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll also get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for half off on your first year. Real quick before I get into segment 2, just a reminder, if you're enjoying what I'm doing here today on YouTube and what I do on a regular basis here on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel, make sure to go and smash that like button first and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, be on the lookout for part 3 of my Chicago Blackhawks Summer 2025 Top Prospects list dropping tomorrow, where I'll be diving through numbers 6 through 10. Segment 2 on today's show, though, picking up where I left off. Next up is number 13, and I have 2025 first-round selection Mason West. And this is another intriguing point of my prospects list here, Blackhawks fans, because I think, spoiler alert, Mason West here at number 13, Václav Nestor still next at number 12. We're in that point of high ceiling, but also a little bit of a high risk with both of these players. And I'd like to call this the Sam Renzel route from a couple of years ago, because I remember Sam Renzel being, a 17-year-old first-round selection for the Blackhawks. We knew he was going to be a long-term project, and a little bit of a same mold here to Mason West and Václav Nestor still, right? Obviously, the ceiling, if he winds up panning out as, the Blackhawks project him to, I mentioned this way back when I first had Sam Renzel on my prospects list. He was someone who could easily, wind up in the top 3 or in the top 5. But starting things out, I had him somewhere between number 10 and number 15 because they are a little bit of a question mark still at this point in their development. I feel the same way here about Mason West and Václav Nestor still. Both of these guys have the potential to be well inside the top 5, top 6 in the Blackhawks prospect pool in a couple of seasons if they go on to develop properly in college hockey. But both very fascinating selections here for the Blackhawks in the 2025 draft. Mason West went 29th overall. The Blackhawks, like they did the year prior with Marek Vanacker, traded back in to make yet another first-round selection. And Mason West is a big boy, according to him in his recent interview that he did with John Gruden of Barstool Sports. I'll actually be talking about that a little bit more on tomorrow's episode during segment 3 for anyone who just wants to make a mental note of that. Mason West mentioned in that interview he's now about 6'7", 218 pounds as a forward, has played both the center and the wing spot. In his young career, I envision he'll more likely be a wing if I had to guess, but obviously we're going to see what's going to transpire with him these next couple of seasons. But the big talk about Mason West is that he's returning to Edina High School in Minnesota, for his senior year of high school to hopefully win a state championship game with his team as a quarterback. Won the state championship last year playing hockey for Edina, one of the more notable hockey schools in Minnesota, which is loaded with those. He also has been a standout quarterback throughout his career. I believe last season he had a 38-4 touchdown interception ratio and has been highly talked about that he's been recruited heavily to go and play football as well. Still only 17 years old. Kid isn't going to turn 18 until August, and he is absolutely shredded. I mean, if you couldn't tell during some of his interviews when the Blackhawks drafted him or during Blackhawks development camp and whatnot, looking at him in this interview with John Gruden, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a grown ass man at 17 years of age. Going to be interesting to see what he puts up in terms of his numbers for his senior season playing at quarterback. Knock on wood that Mason West will be able to stay healthy. Blackhawks, I'm a little bit surprised they're as comfortable as they are, letting a first-round pick of theirs return to his high school to go play his senior year of football, considering, just how physical of a sport it is and, considering how much they've now invested to him at this point in time. But they've given him the A-OK. And then once he wraps up playing football, he'll actually join on with the Fargo Force of the USHL to conclude the 25-26 season. Played with the Fargo Force in a little bit of action last year, tallied 9 points, 1 goal, and 8 assists in 10 USHL games. Was a monster for Edina in his high school league, though. 49 points, 27 goals, 22 assists in 31 high school games. And then it'll be, once he wraps up this last year of high school that he's still got to go through, he'll be joining on with the Michigan State Spartans in the fall of 26 for the 26-27 season, where he'll play his freshman campaign. But what it's all about with Mason West is obviously that imposing frame out there. I could not imagine being like, above average high school hockey player in the state of Minnesota, and you just see this absolute unit step out onto the ice in Mason West, 6'7", 218. That's the first thing you obviously got to talk about with this kid. He is huge, and there's definitely reason to believe he can continue to fill out that frame and maybe even continue to grow, as he's reportedly grown another inch since being drafted by the Blackhawks. But along with that size, I do think, he's just got the raw athleticism, and the Blackhawks clearly value that, right? Tested very well during the NHL draft combine, in a similar mold to AJ Spellacy, but kind of on steroids here, because Mason West is the much bigger of the two players, but he's a very natural skater and moves around on the ice very well for a player of his size. Has a good offensive game as well, definitely more developed in that sense, I think, and has the higher upside if he does wind up panning out compared to someone like AJ Spellacy. But it's still a little bit early to exactly put our finger on what type of player Mason West can be, but undoubtedly he has a very high ceiling if he can put it all together. He just needs a little bit of refining with the Fargo Force next year with Michigan State. I'm expecting, because he's such a raw prospect, he'll likely spend at the bare minimum 2 years developing with the Spartans, but so much potential because of his size, athleticism, and skating ability. Definitely had to put Mason West ahead of guys like Del Mastro and Ryan Green, who I think, again, are going to be puzzle pieces here in Chicago. It's just that Mason West undoubtedly has the higher ceiling of the two. And then next up, as I mentioned already, at number 12, I have Václav Nestrasil, the 25th overall pick in the 2025 NHL draft. Went 4 selections ahead of Mason West, which I'm sure he'll be able to give him a good rib about moving forward. That's something I've joked about with Landon Slaggert and Wyatt Kaiser over the years, when Slaggert was selected 79th overall, Kaiser was selected 81st overall. I figured, he'd be giving him some jabs to the rib, saying I was the 3rd round selection that the Blackhawks wanted to make sure they could get off the board first here. Václav Nestrasil could always make that same joke for years to come with Mason West. But Nestrasil, a little bit of a project here as well. Turned 18 years old in April, so on the younger side for the 2025 NHL draft. Going to be attending UMass in the fall for his freshman season, which I think is a really good move for him. Going to be playing in a really good conference in college hockey. Will definitely, at a really good program too, I should mention, will definitely help develop him and keep him on the right track these next couple of years. But Nestrasil spent this past season, like Mason West, but in a larger sample size, playing in the USHL with the Muskegon Lumberjacks. If that name sounds familiar, it was the USHL club that Sacha Boisvert played for when the Blackhawks selected him in the first round of the 2024 NHL draft. But a solid year for Nestrasil in the U, 19 goals, 23 assists, and 61 contests, but finished the year on a really high note. Might have played his best hockey during the USHL postseason, where he had 13 points, 7 goals, 6 assists, and 14 contests. Like Mason West, he's another right-handed shot in this forward group with some good size. Plays with some physicality, even though he definitely has to continue to put on some more weight. He's only about 190 pounds as a 6'6" winger. So Mason West definitely more filled out than Václav Nestrasil is. But I do think Václav is a little bit less of a project compared to Mason West, mostly because Mason's been splitting his time between hockey and football these last couple of years. But a decent skill game for Václav Nestrasil as well. Definitely needs to get stronger in order to be the power forward, skill forward that I think he can kind of become one day down the road. But like I mentioned, not as big of a project, I think, as Mason West is. So I do think Václav Nestrasil should be ahead of Mason West in the Blackhawks prospect rankings right here, right now. However, I do think Mason West, if he winds up hitting, he is the one with the higher ceiling between the two. But Nestrasil being a little bit less of a project, a little less raw, with more experience as a young 18-year-old, couple of months only older than Mason West. That's the reasoning behind me having Nestrasil ahead of West right now at number 12, but I really wouldn't be surprised in a couple of years' time if Mason West is the more intriguing of the two prospects. And then closing things out here in part 2, my Blackhawks summer 2025 prospects list at number 11. I have Jack Pridham, 92nd overall pick for the Blackhawks in the 2024 NHL draft, a prospect I was super excited by last year, and I really love the skill set that he possesses. I'm definitely higher on Jack Pridham than most Blackhawks fans, but I really do believe with the pace that this kid plays with and the diverse offensive game, I really think he's one to keep an eye on and could put up some monster numbers in the OHL this year. Listed at 6'1", 176-pound winger who's going to turn 20 in October, and he had 54 points, 27 goals, and 27 assists in 48 OHL games with the Kitchener Rangers this past season after leaving the BCHL because of the rules change that allowed him, at the time he was signed to Boston University, wasn't eligible to play in the OHL because of that, but obviously due to the rule change that allowed Pridham to go from the BCHL to a much more competitive league in the OHL, got a top 6 opportunity with Kitchener, and I really believe he made the most of it, and is not going to be now joining on with the Terriers in the fall. I thought, that would have been a good opportunity for Pridham to face some better competition and be under, Jay Pandolfo, one of the best coaches and one of the best programs in all of college hockey. But I do also understand him electing to return to Kitchener, where he's probably going to be, a top-line center or top-line winger for that team. He's going to be getting a ton of opportunities in a real comfortable spot to pick up off the momentum that he left last season with. And wasn't guaranteed to be getting, top 6 or even top 9 ice time with Boston University next year. And it seems like this is a move in order to allow Pridham to make the jump to professional hockey and join on with the Blackhawks organization at the conclusion of this season, because he likely would have gotten a smaller opportunity with BU. I don't know if the Blackhawks necessarily, or they might have, I don't know, it just might have made things a little bit muddier for Jack Pridham in terms of his path to the pro level. So, I can kind of see both sides with it, but hopefully we'll put up some massive numbers, like I said a moment ago, as he's returning to the Kitchener Rangers. But the skill set that stands out to me about Jack Pridham, mentioned this a moment ago as well, the pace in which he plays with. I think he's a really solid skater, has some decent size to him at 6'1", would definitely like him to put on some more weight before hitting the pro scene, but a good goal scorer, good passer. I think reads plays really well, and overall just has a sound offensive IQ. Whenever I see clips being shared of Jack Pridham, it seems like he's doing something really savvy out there on the ice offensively. Needs to gain some weight a little bit, but I think he has all the tools to be a middle 6 winger of the future for the Blackhawks potentially. I know I'm a little bit higher on Jack Pridham than others, but he really impressed me with what he did both in the BCHL and with the Kitchener Rangers last year. Bit more of a proven commodity than Václav Nestrasil and Mason West. I do think both of those guys probably have the higher upside than Jack Pridham, but I think Pridham's upside himself is pretty high as well. And I think kind of could be in a similar mold in a couple of years down the road in terms of his future role with the Blackhawks. So Jack Pridham wrapping things up for me here at number 11. That takes care of part 2 of my Blackhawks summer 2025 top prospects list. Let me know in the comment section below how you think I did here in part 2. If I had a certain prospect too high, certain prospect too low, if I was just spot on. Give me your full thoughts down below in the comment section. But before I wrap things up, coming up in just a moment, I still have to go through Sacha Boisvert and the rest of the Blackhawks prospects roles so far in the World Junior Summer Showcase. Just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Here to start off your day. For your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. And you can now find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, the World Junior Summer Showcase got underway over the weekend, and as I've mentioned several times here on the show in recent weeks, the Blackhawks, 3 prospects that are participating in the WJSS are Sacha Boisvert and Marek Vanacker for Team Canada, and AJ Spellacy for Team USA. Anton Frandell wound up being a late removal from Team Sweden's roster to avoid yet another across-the-world travel from Sweden to North America, which is understandable considering how many trips he's gone through in recent months, and also that the SHL season is coming up here right around the corner. But the last time I talked about the World Junior Summer Showcase last week, I was diving through the couple of tournament rosters that we got, mainly just with the United States, as Canada elected to release their roster as literally last minute as it gets. But fortunately, we do now know Canada's roster, and to make things easy enough, both Marek Vanacker and Sacha Boisvert are playing for Team Red. But I did want to talk about the roles that these 3 prospects have been playing for each of their respected groups so far through the opening couple days of the Summer Showcase. AJ Spellacy is playing for Team USA Blue. They've got a couple of games already under their belt. They played on Sunday night and Monday night. And Spellacy has been playing in the third line center role for Team Blue, which, obviously things are going to change based on what goes down in the fall during all of these players' junior seasons and how Canada wants to mix and match their roster. But we start to get kind of a sense of the roles that Hockey Canada and the other countries are starting to put these players in. And I don't think it's a surprise to see AJ Spellacy even as Canada has split its rosters into 2, Team White and Team Red. It's not surprising to see Spellacy in a third line, bottom 6 type of spot, because as I've talked about here a couple of different times, I fully expect him to be fighting for one of those final spots on Team USA's roster in a 3rd to 4th line role. What I do think he has going for him is he has a unique skill set compared to most of the high skill prospects that typically get invited to these camps, right? Like AJ Spellacy would be a good, different style depth guy to have down in your bottom 6 because he can provide you with some physicality. He can do some things that other guys aren't necessarily known for or their best tools. And then also he was on their radar a little bit last year as out of their draft year prospect, right, was among the younger players of the camp invitees. It was going to be a long shot for him to wind up making that team, wound up being a part of the final cuts. But I do just in general like that AJ Spellacy got on Team USA's radar. I don't know why I said it. AJ Spellacy is playing for Canada. He's playing for Team Blue for Team USA. I just noticed I said that a moment ago, and I apologize for that, Blackhawks fans. Spellacy is playing for Team Blue for Team USA. He is an American-born prospect from Ohio, grew up playing the great American sport of football. So apologies if I misspoke there a moment ago. Even though the United States and Canada as well have split up into 2 different roster groups, Spellacy being in the bottom 6 for the USA on Team Blue is not surprising whatsoever. He's going to have to work his tail off to wind up making this team for the red, white, and blue during the winter time. But I do think, again, he's put himself in a good position to have an opportunity to earn one of those final spots. But not surprising to see his role for the United States so far to kick off the World Junior Summer Showcase. For Team Canada, I mentioned both Marek Vanacker and Sacha Boisvert, 2 first-round picks for the Blackhawks last year, have been playing on Team Canada Red. Their first action came today, actually, as they had a scrimmage against one another, Team Red versus Team White. Sacha Boisvert, though, since Canada has been practicing, and in this game here tonight, was playing on Team Canada Red's top line, along with Berkeley Catton and Porter Martone. And I think this is super notable because I saw a couple of different Blackhawks beat writers, content creators, when talking about these World Junior Summer Showcase rosters in recent weeks. They mentioned that Sacha Boisvert, they don't think he's a lock for Team Canada. Don't know necessarily if he's a guarantee to make this roster. I think he's a guarantee to make this team. I've been outspoken about this, and I think seeing the role, again, I know they're split into two different teams here, but seeing that Boisvert has been put on the top line in a spot along with Berkeley Cadden and Porter Martone, which, by the way, is one heck of a line. I do think that's just showing where, again, Canada kind of pictures Sacha Boisvert being part of the package. I really do think, in all likelihood, he's going to wind up being on this team for Team Canada, especially if he makes the most of his opportunity in a first or second line role for Boston University to open up the 25-26 campaign. But love to see Boisvert playing along some highly skilled guys inside Canada's, top six there, and had a nice primary assist in the contest here today. Then the other Blackhawks prospect on Canada Red is Marek Vanacker, who's been switching between the third line center and third line wing spot, but has been skating with Cole Baudouin and Brady Martin, and actually scored a power play goal for Team Canada here this evening. So some good production by these two Blackhawks prospects in Canada's opening game of the World Junior Summer Showcase. But like AJ Spellacy, I think Vanacker is a guy who's going to be in the mix for one of those final roster spots for Team Canada here. I think he's maybe on the outside looking in at this point in time, but again, because I think he has a little bit of a more well-rounded and diverse skill set, and is a player who can still play with pace and have some good offensive game in the bottom six, I do think there's a chance that Marek Vanacker winds up making this team, but Canada is going to be a little bit more competitive, I believe, compared to AJ Spellacy competing for one of those final spots for Team USA. But some good stuff out of these Blackhawks prospects so far at the World Junior Summer Showcase. I'll make sure to keep you all updated both on my Blackhawks Twitter account at Talkin' Hockey. Make sure to go and check that out if you don't already. And also here on the show in terms of what goes down this week at the World Junior Summer Showcase. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way you won't miss out as soon as the episode is uploaded each and every day. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Find me on X at JackBushman2, but go and again check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Until tomorrow's episode for part 3 of my summer 2025 top prospects list, everyone enjoy the rest of your days. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.